The two most important days of your life are when you were born and when you find out why. And I think it's time for a lot of people to start searching out why they were born. You never know who you're going to help, right? And if you end up taking a moment to be vulnerable, to post something, to share something vulnerable, it might trigger somebody else to do the same thing. And it's from there, I promise you guys, it's just like a domino effect. And you just never know who it's going to reach. I use the word here, normalize vulnerability. Those words, so to some people, they hide their vulnerabilities thinking that they're weaknesses, but I really think they're the strengths that help us kind of come closer together.
Francisco, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for doing this. Tell us, what was your podcast about, and tell us a little bit about your persona.
Hi guys, yeah. So my podcast basically is about it's called Voices que Sanan in Spanish, and in English that translates to Voices that Heal. Basically talking about my healing journey in the past, everything that I've gone through, and everything that I'm going through now, and how I've gotten ahead of it. And the persona, I just built it around everything that I've experienced, everything that I've gone through, and everything that I want to continue going through, and continuing to build from there.
And were there any challenges early in the course that people need to watch out for? I know that being asked to build a persona and do research and ask questions of other classmates and peers and do construct a survey, that can be intimidating, right?
Absolutely. And I think, the way that you structured it using the GroupMe text and communication channel, that was very helpful in getting to know your classmates. But for me, one of the most challenging things was just learning Adobe Express. That was such a new program for me, but I read your little blurb that said elementary kid school, use this. So it's pretty intuitive. And so yeah, that was one of the hardest things that I was like, man, should I drop this class or not? Because I cannot wrap my head around this.
You are not the only one. You are in good company, and it looks intimidating at first, doesn't it? It's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm not any kind of software when you pop in, it looks intimidating." But I think we can agree that Adobe Premiere Pro is more intimidating than Adobe Express, right?
That's that absolutely correct. Yes. And I felt that way coming across new technology in the past too. At my current job, I was like, man, I'm ready to quit because I didn't know any of this. But now it's like, fairly simple. We're at the end of the course and I can make a whole podcast.
Excellent. And in your first podcast trailer assignment, did you use Adobe Podcast or did you use something else, and how was that experience?
I did. So I didn't know how to record it initially. So I just recorded on my computer. I uploaded it to Adobe Express and then edited it from there. But yeah, so for the trailer, I just basically did that. And then I was able to kind of play with a few little sounds and tweaks once I got the hang of how to edit on Adobe Express.
Excellent. And we're going to take a closer look at that later when we take a look at your media kit. So stay tuned for that. What about your interview and the episode one that was part solo, part interview? Did you have any struggles or challenges that would be informative for students about to take this course?
Yes. So I think I ended up using Zoom, and we talked about Zoom having, not as many capabilities as other programs have. But I interviewed my roommate, and it was only on, I think it was the speaker view. So it wasn't like an interview where we're side by side. So that was challenge. I forgot to completely turn that on. It's just a feature you turn on and off. So other than that, I don't think we had any issues. I think she did talk quite a bit, which is fine, right? Because I didn't want her to share her story. So, other than that, it was smooth.
Excellent. And in your construction of the second episode with the visual emphasis, what kind of challenges did you have whenever you were trying to look for images? Did you find images on Pexels? Did you find images on Adobe Express? Where did you find them?
No, I actually used the AI feature on Adobe Express just to create my kind of like introduction cover photo and then outro. But for the visuals, I kind of already had those. I was like, man, I want to talk about this. I want to talk about where I went and what I experienced. So I kind of already had those dialed up. It was a lot of like searching through the past to kind of take good pictures. So I ended up narrowing it down. But
Awesome. And in the audio episode, did you have any challenges with creating great audio?
I did actually. The audio, there's an enhanced audio feature on Adobe Express. I ended up recording with some headphones, some traditional headphones wired. But when I did the AI enhancement, it kind of gave me an echo once the AI enhancement was finished. So I just ended up removing it all entirely and just submitted it without it.
After you completed that, you were going into creating a media kit. Can you share your media kit with us here?
Okay, that sounds good. So this is the first, the landing page per se, the Voces que Sanan. Of course, this is just an AI generated picture of what I entered, and a little bit lower we have the podcast overview here. Just everything, like I talk about traveling, relationships, personal growth, everything I've gone through, and then we have
So let's go back to that. So it looks like you had trouble narrowing it down just like everybody else.
yes,
Because one of the things that is hard for most people is to pick just one thing. And you did pick one thing, but you had a cross section of emotional healing, self awareness, resilience, personal stories, reflections, lessons from real life. Travel and relationships and personal growth are three big categories, and you're combining those, right?
right.
So, how was
Yeah.
that struggle? Like, what made you choose these specific three personal brand pillars or podcasting pillars?
Yeah, so I think, and overall, the essence of the podcast, I just wanted it to feel kind of personal and share the story and how I've gone about attaining those stories, and a lot of those were travel, a lot of those were experiencing relationships. And the most important one was obviously personal growth. So that's why I ended up putting all these together.
Excellent. And if you had to choose one of those for your personal brand, what would you choose?
I think personal growth, right? Personal growth has been the most important thing for the past 5 or 6 years for myself. So I think the personal growth is the one I would absolutely pick.
Excellent. And would you leverage that for a potential employer or a client in your own business? Where are you headed? What do you want to do when you graduate?
I think, yeah, I would want to kind of express where I used to be with little or no knowledge of, like, let's just say Microsoft Excel.
Hmm.
Uh, Now, having gone through these courses at UTSA, at my job, they do continuous learning. Um, Personal growth in that field is tremendous. I know how to do pivot tables. I know how to create data charts and things like that. So I think that'd be pretty valuable for an employer in the future, whoever's looking for some kind of data analytics and things like that.
And that's professional growth too, right? So it's professional growth and personal growth you're interested in, right?
Or absolutely. So I think they're, one and the same, but I kind of like to differentiate one from the other.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of work are you doing when you graduate? What are you looking to do?
So I'm currently working for UT System. Now I work for the application service for students who want to become medical doctors, dentists, veterinarians. I am basically in charge of reviewing their application and submitting them to the schools. So I want to continue doing that, but at more of a kind of hosting a YouTube session to answer any questions, to alleviate any concerns from these new applicants who are going to go into the cycle.
Excellent. So a podcast could be a good format for that, just like an FAQ page that's more interactive, right?
Correct. Yes. So, and we do have those now, but I'm kind of in the background. I'm not, in the forefront talking to these students. I'm just answering IM questions and things like that.
Excellent. Cool. Tell us about your bio.
Yeah, so the bio here, it's just pretty general. I talk about, what I've been through, the mentorship and the self-discovery that I've gone through. And I use the word here, normalize vulnerability. Those words, so to some people, they hide their vulnerabilities, thinking that they're weaknesses, but I really think they're the strengths that help us kind of come closer together.
And can you translate the name of your podcast for those non-Spanish speakers out there?
Yeah, of course. So Voces que Sanan is basically voices that heal. I'm an ESL student, English as a second language for my entire life. So Spanish has always been first. So I thought to myself, why not start this podcast off in Spanish as well?
And that also builds in authenticity. It's a bringing a part of who you are and your personality into your podcast.
Correct. Yeah. So, and as I was brainstorming ideas when I first started the class, was like, when what am I going to talk about? And then, talking to my roommate, talking to my mom, my sister, they were like, "Oh, why don't you talk about what you've gone through?" And then that's what spawned the idea of Voces, Sanan.
Excellent.
So, yeah. So after the bio here, we have this picture. This is in one of our road trips that we took, me and my partner. This is the Grand Teton Mountains, and it was a perfect day. Overcast, obviously, but it's made for great pictures.
Yeah. The Grand Tetons are epic.
Yeah, they absolutely are.
And I
It was
love
my
those dark
first.
clouds too. Adds a lot.
For sure. So yeah, I have some episode details here. My cat's in the way. Episode one, is basically about finding your voice after hardship. Episode two, I talk about some books that I kind of helped me through my healing journey and reflection. And episode three is healing through travel. So all of my travels, everything that I experienced in those travels.
And I remember got really authentic with your personal challenges too, your major life challenges in your personal life. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I am not recently, but I was divorced about 5 years ago. I delved deep down into in one of the episodes about how I came out of that. Very broken, very lost, very scared. But in the end, counseling, the support system that I had to rebuild because the old support system wasn't working for me. It kind of helped me flourish and bloom into a new person. So I kind of really just talked about everything that I'd gone through, all the failures even after the divorce. And they're needed, because you need to continue growing somehow.
And sharing that kind of journey can inspire people to, again, tune in to build that relationship that only podcasting can really do. In video, you can build that relationship. In podcasting, you can build that relationship. But in social media, with those short video clips, it's much more difficult to build those kinds of relationships. So it's great that you shared such a personal and meaningful journey and how you are overcoming that challenge and adversity.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, the old support system that I had, I think we all have support systems, but I think it takes a lot of realization to realize that maybe these support systems aren't good for me or they're not meant for me. And it's it's about finding your community and it's about finding your people and letting go also of those people that don't serve you, that don't benefit. That might seem selfish, but I'm 38 years old and I spent the majority part of my life depending on and relying on people who wouldn't, you know, care to do the same for me.
So your advice, it sounds like, is to seek a community of help and healing, to seek therapy, to seek people who are supportive and who you can equally support as they support you. Well, how else would you summarize your advice for people going through something like a divorce?
To encapsulate it, I think just it'll get better. If you want to get better yourself, everything around you will get better. That's the one thing I learned in counseling and seeking new people and finding new people is that I've gotten better. I don't go back to the toxic things that made me feel like less of a human being, less of a man, feeling emasculated. Like those people are not in my life anymore. And some of the people I let go of are family members. And that's completely okay because not only that, but I think the way that we treat each other is really important no matter if we're family or not. And now my new family members aren't even my family members. They're not my bloodline. They're not anything related to me, but they're considered my family now.
That's really touching. Does the personal experience connect to this idea of growth and professional growth and the travel and the lessons that you have here in your other episodes? And if so, how so?
I think it does, right? Like professionally, we've gone through some leadership changes that I don't agree with, but that's for another day. So professionally, I think I've kind of put that on the back burner for now and just bide my time, do my work, especially in in the type of environment that this country is right now. I kind of want to hold on to the job, but I think it does all tie in together in the end. So I want to continue kind of having a little bit of growth in my professional career, but majority of the time spending time with myself, with my partner, with my cats to continue that personal brand that I put out here for the podcast.
Your degree means what for your professional life?
Honestly, as I said, we've been talking about moving out of the country for the last 5 years or so. And if I now that I have this communications degree, I've done teaching at elementary, middle school, high school, but I've never had a degree, right? So I never had a teacher's salary or teacher certification. But with this communications degree and my experience, I could teach anywhere in the world. I could teach English to Spanish speaking students down in Mexico. We've looked at, Italy to just, and my partner, she's a math major, so she can teach math pretty much anywhere. But yeah, I think professionally, it'll open the doors for me to be able to, one, secure a stable income anywhere else that we decide to move to, and two, just be more tranquil and live a more fulfilling life.
Excellent. I love hearing the degree stories. Okay, back to our listener statistics and our dashboard here. What did we learn from our stats?
So, so my stats were kind of weak, but I think that's
Completely normal. This is exactly what we expect to see in an 8-week course where you're only producing 3 episodes. So this is actually really good for 3 episodes.
okay. Good to know. But yeah, so some statistics here. It's just, some of the views we talked about, the watch time hours, and then down here we have this graph that shows kind of how long they watched. And for me, I was kind of there's like 20, 25, 30 kids, 30 students in this course. And I'm like, okay, not everybody's going to watch this, but I think the majority of these were from my mom watching, but
Hey, nothing wrong with family support. Go mom, right?
right. So yeah, so see there's some of the statistics over the course of of your course that we took. So yeah, and I think it was pretty simple snapshot from YouTube. They do some data analytics for your channel.
Excellent. And tell us about the testimonials. Were those meaningful to you?
Absolutely. So I wanted to translate here what my mom said in Spanish, but she talks about I've already opened up to her about all this, so it was refreshing for her to hear after all these years again. And then a little further down, Stacy, she's my roommate. She talks about, the conversation that we had and how it helped her kind of relive those moments and realize that she had grown from them. And I think Areli, she's another family friend down in Austin, and she always finds my voice very soothing and calm for some reason. But when I hear my own voice in a recording, I cringe for some reason. But I think that's for another story.
That's again a lot of people, Francisco, have that exact same reaction for sure. And it is soothing. You have that kind of lower, late night DJ voice that's more calming and chill. And that's, I
Thank
think,
you.
something that people find very comforting. And you made this such a personal project. You had such personal relationships featured in these testimonials. Did it impact your relationships with any of the folks here that you're mentioning?
No, I think at this point, especially even believe it or not, with my mom, we didn't have the greatest relationship even 5 years ago. But me being transparent and honest about my feelings and even listening to this podcast for her, she kind of got a little bit closer. She's reaching out more every day. She's just checking in, and I never had that before. But with my dad, I did have that, but he's been gone since 2009. So um, it's been repairing that relationship with my mom for the past 5 years, slowly but steadily. And then for Stacy and Areli, there have already been these close friends that I've chosen to be part of my life. And they know where I come from, they know where I've been, and they know where I'm at. And more importantly, they know where I want to go. So it didn't make us stronger, it didn't make us any less, but I think it's holding steady.
Do you have any advice for people who are struggling with that kind of life transparency? Because I know people want to be authentic. They want to showcase their struggles, their hardships, and how they overcame them. But a lot of them are too shy or don't want that kind of exposure. What advice do you have to those students?
Yeah, I think a lot of students nowadays, like I said, I used to teach elementary, middle school, and high school. They always post on social media, but they post the best parts of their lives. They don't post the real things. And for me, I've always made it a point to kind of balance, post some lows, post some middles, post some highs. But my advice would just be you never know who you're going to help, right? And if you end up taking a moment to be vulnerable, to post something, to share something vulnerable, it might trigger somebody else to do the same thing. And it's from there, I promise you guys, it's just like a domino effect. And you just never know who it's going to reach.
Yeah. And in storytelling, I do storytelling coaching and I'm really into storytelling. We talk about speaking from your scars, not your wounds, and making sure that you're healed before you start talking about the process because a conversation with a therapist is very different than a public communication that's going to be out there. So I know that you were speaking from a place of having already healed in most cases, right?
I think you're right, because if we come from a place of being wounded, we're gonna wound somebody else. But if we've healed from those wounds and they scar up, we talk from the scars, it's just like a memory. But now that memory doesn't have to be why did that happen to me? It's it's how could it have benefited me, right? So you look at it from a different lens, and I just feel like for me, I have a lot of scars, and now I wear them proudly, because I have gone through this, and I'm not the only one who has gone through this because I've talked to a lot of people, and they've gone through the same thing and worse, right? So it's very emotional, but you learn to kind of control your emotions, to control how much you express to somebody, how much you trust. And, when you meet certain people, you gauge who you trust and who you don't.
For sure. For sure. Okay, let's move on to sponsorship and partnership opportunities. It's such a personal storytelling project. How did you frame the idea of partnerships and sponsorships?
So for partnerships, I just wanted it to be, for one, affordable. I saw some other classmates put like $100, but I didn't want to make any kind of money or anything. I just wanted somebody who's going to be mindful of their time, who's going to be authentic, and and so these are some of the things that I posted. Some episode sponsorships. I could have some branding talks in there, and if I had to, or if anybody wanted to be a guest on the episode, we could do like a $20 flat rate and we can talk about anything that they wanted to talk about, as long as it kind of fell in line with self growth or mental health or any kind of resiliency that they've gone through. Oh, and of course, listener shout outs. These are great because I do have this old girlfriend of mine. She's not a girlfriend, but she's a friend that is a girl. She does a lot of like TikTok videos, and she gets a lot of views somehow, but she always gives a shout out to one of the family members. And I thought that would be pretty cool.
So you were inspired by her to conclude that feature, more of a community support feature.
Correct. So everything is like it's not stolen, right? But we just borrow it, right? And in hopes that it can kind of elicit some kind of result.
Okay. I do want to ask, in your struggle to share things that might have been more personal, did you find any tips or tricks that might help people who are struggling with the same kind of thing?
Uh, Tips and tricks. I think for one, I didn't know my body when I was living in survival mode, because you're in survival mode. So I think the number one thing once I jumped into counseling was I had to feel my body. I had to rest my mind, and I had to give into it. Sometimes, some people just there's this thing where men are supposed to act tough and not show any kind of emotion. I had to kind of eradicate that from my life. And I think listening to our bodies is really important because it tells us a lot, from the stress that can lead to physical ailments, and from just your mental health, not letting you get past a course, you know? So I think that was one of the main things that I learned is listening to my body.
That's really, really powerful advice. I know we have men struggling with an epidemic of loneliness, struggling with an epidemic of meaning in many cases. And that dimension of our society and our culture can get in the way with other things too. Can you speak to how you overcome those kinds of common problems for men? Because you just mentioned what a lot of people have labeled toxic masculinity, but there's a lot of guys who are like, "Oh no, it's not toxic masculinity, it's just being a man." Can you talk about how you navigate that razor's edge of embracing manliness and at the same time being less toxic in the way that we frame it, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Um, I think back to when I first met my partner, I was already in a much clearer headspace. I was very comfortable with my sexuality and just who I am as a person. I think now I'm not as masculine per se as I used to be. I still cry. I cry watching movies. I cry when my cats, are embracing each other because I don't have much time with them left. I know there's a finality of things, and the finality of me being the toxic masculinity that I was forced to be was about 5 years ago. So now I think even when I say like a guy is handsome, that doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother my partner because she knows who we are together as a partnership and who I am. Right. So, and the same as if I said a woman was cute. Right. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that I'm attracted to her. It just means that I see beauty in and out.
I heard you say you're planning on a possible move in the future, maybe distant, maybe near. I feel sad that we're gonna lose talent, right? The UT system theoretically might be losing talent, and the home team here might be losing talent. But I also feel joy that you will be able to take what you've learned and apply it to maybe another country. What are your feelings about moving? Are you committed?
So we're about 60-40, in terms of 60 being leaving, right? The family anchor that has kept me in Texas forever has now dissipated because I've let go of most of those family members, except for my mom and my sister. But they know, right? They know I'm happy. They know I'm growing and I'm being consistent with who I am. I am actually, we've already started saving up some money to actually move, and we could live in Mexico and keep the same salaries and be living just fine, you know. Of course, moving across the pond to Italy or to Europe would be a different story, but we have yet to visit. I've obviously grown up in Mexico throughout the summers, so I know what it's like. And moms are worry wards, but she's always telling me there's all this kinds of bad things. But I'm like, okay, mom, well, let's dial it back a bit, you know. So, but yeah, I think we are. uh, I wouldn't see it as a loss. I'd see it as somebody else's gain because there are so many people that are out there to help. And as long as I can continue, first and foremost, helping myself to be able to help others, I think that's what's important.
Excellent. And that ideal picture of the future, the gap from where you are now to where you wanna be, now that you're earning your degree, what does that look like? What does that ideal picture look like? And how might a podcast help you with that?
Yeah, I think right now there's just so many unknowns of like where we want to land, right? And going through this podcast, even talking about moving now is kind of making me feel like this is it, right? Like it's time to go. Things aren't getting better. Um, so I think it's I'm not really sure like what that gap is, but I know it's there, right? And I have what May is right around the corner. I can present this piece of paper, the degree to my employer, and be like, hey, can I get a little bit more money so I can accelerate to get to that gap?
Excellent. Yeah, that figuring that out, I know is hard, and people appreciate when you can share the journey, as you did in your podcast, sharing your journey and your personal struggles. Do you have any other advice for people who are starting this class, who are thinking about their podcast or their personal brand and trying to get narrow And especially those people who want to do something more personal like you did, because a lot of people choose to do professional things. And you did the thing that I think is harder, doing that more private, that more personal thing.
Yeah, and one of the things I really appreciated about this course is that you allowed us to use artificial intelligence, right? I use that as a tool to kind of fine tune my ideas, to give me ideas. I didn't have it write all these things for me and just and put it into the right into Canvas. So I think for me, I just put in all these ideas, all these thoughts, and it was like, why don't you talk about this, and then lay it out like this. And I thought it was a good idea because I had no idea how to start up a podcast. But one of the pieces of advice is just talk about something that you're really good at or that you know really well, whether it's social media, food, books, whatever have you. Or even just your struggles through your time at UTSA or wherever you've come from.
That's great advice, and I think a lot of people will take that to heart. Francisco, do you have any other parting words of wisdom before we ask where people can contact you?
No, I think one of the most important things that I've remembered throughout the years is the two most important days of your life are when you were born and when you find out why. And I think it's time for a lot of people to start searching out why they were born and go from there.
Excellent. Yeah, purpose and meaning, it's a part of podcasting, it's a part of personal branding. That's part of what drives us in our Ikigai frameworks and our who we can serve and why we want to serve this particular group of people with this particular skill set or this particular mission. The mission is important. Francisco, where can people find you if they want to learn more?
Well, I am pretty dark on the social medias, but I do post every now and then. My Instagram handle is John W. Creasy,
Can you
which is
spell that for us?
yeah, John, obviously JOHN _W_ Creasy CREASY. If you have trouble finding it, it's just a picture of what looks like a hair follicle on your phone there. So I did it on purpose years ago so students wouldn't find me. So
Do you have a LinkedIn profile yet? And then last name Galvan in San Antonio, Texas?
yes, San Antonio.
Okay. And then we'll be able to find and connect with Francisco. Francisco, thank you so much for taking the time to share your wisdom and your experience with the course. I know that people will appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it was great to talk to you.